Welcome to JSA TV and JSA Podcasts, the newsroom for telecom professionals. I'm Carl Sketchley, and joining me today is Asher Genoot, CEO of Hut 8, an energy infrastructure operator and Bitcoin miner with self-mining, hosting, managed services, and traditional data center operations across North America. Asher, welcome to JSA TV.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on today.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. So, Asher, tell me a bit about Hut 8 as it stands today.
Hut 8 is building the next generation energy infrastructure platform. And what that means is we're building a company that sits at the intersection of power and technology. Our big macro long-term thesis is as technology evolves, whether that be Bitcoin, whether that be AI, whether that be robotics, rockets, so too will its consumption on power and power at scale. And so our belief is if we can find the right way to build digital infrastructure at that interconnection between power and technology, we can build a really valuable company that helps propel technology and humanity forward.
I see. I love that very succinct answer. So what would you say is the biggest pain point facing the digital infrastructure industry today?
I think the demand on power consumption is increasing, and we have a power grid, whether that be generation in some places where there's not enough generation of power, or in many situations, it's transmission. You can't actually transport the power to areas where the load is. And so our grid today doesn't have the power at scale that some of these technologies need in the areas that they need them. In addition to that, I think the load profiles are changing as well. Historically, generation has been pretty stable load. Think about kind of coal, hydro, nuclear, natural gas. And now you have more of a renewable kind of like generation that ebbs and flows. So wind and solar particularly. But when you think about it on the load side, historically load has been relatively stable, right? Think manufacturing facilities, predictable load profiles. With data centers, especially ones that are like GPU training, that load profile is becoming more and more volatile, and therefore how it interacts with the grid, how we think about grid stability. And so it's two things. One is access to power and power at scale, and how do we think about that connection point between load and power to create a stable grid that can continue to evolve and grow.
I see. So where do you see the digital infrastructure industry going as a whole in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think you'll continue to see generators, utilities work with industry in order to figure out how to build generation transmission to help sustain that load, whether that be in competitive choice markets or regulated markets as well, and regulated utilities. I think on the load side, you'll see people adjusting their technologies and their needs of power in terms of the realities of what exists. But at the same time, I think you'll see more people build generation co-located with that load. And I don't think this is anything new, right? If you look back in kind of the steel mill days and the paper mills, like Alcoa is a great example, there was a lot of power generation and power plants built next to those manufacturing facilities. And so it's a different technology, it's a different decade, but we're living in a kind of similar problem set that needs to be solved with different variables.
I see. So a little bit of a pressure question then. How does a company which started as a Bitcoin miner compete in a space with so many well-established incumbents?
I think power is the key. When we started the business, it was less about Bitcoin mining. It was more about our ability to procure power at scale and cheaply. And that's what made us able to basically generate Bitcoin at a low cost. It all came down to our cost of power and our ability to procure energy. And so that same skill set we found extremely valuable as we're looking at more traditional data centers, specifically around AI workloads and GPU training. And so for us, really what that focus is and that drive is continuing to not only be great at finding power front of the meter, behind the meter, but also being able to build infrastructure quickly, thoughtfully, and agilely, being able to kind of enter the market in a way that challenges a lot of the status quo and is able to build the company that's needed in order to build infrastructure for the technology of the future.
I see. Disrupting the status quo, a challenge for any private company, let alone a publicly traded one. Tell us about your approach to managing a company which answers to thousands of investors compared to, say, a leading private company like USBTC.
I think I've actually been asked that question a lot recently. And when I first took over as CEO earlier this year, my biggest fear was us as a company going from private to public, losing that sense of innovation, growth, challenging, and just becoming kind of more, call it corporate or stable. And that was my biggest fear going in. I think I'm very, very proud. And we just had our holiday party a couple of weeks ago. And I said, look, we're here today. We're still essentially operate as a startup. We focus on innovation. We focus on looking at new ways to do things, thinking about where the world is heading. And so for us, authenticity, I would say, is what has allowed us to keep our kind of base and shareholders, people who invest in our company, were very upfront and like about why we do the things we do, how we think about them. And I tell people, I just turned 30 a couple of weeks ago. I'm thinking about how are we building the business for the next 10, 20 years, not how are we building it for the next 1, 2, 3 years. And thus, some of our decisions will not be what the market is looking at that makes sense at that moment in time. And we've done that earlier this year. Luckily, that's played out a lot faster than we had even expected. And so as we continue, focus on building the right business for the long term.
Well, Asher, first off, I got to say happy belated birthday. Welcome to the 30s. And otherwise, it's been a complete pleasure to have you on JSA TV. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Amazing. And viewers, thank you for tuning in as well. In the meantime, happy networking, everyone, and we'll see you all next time.